November 1982. Fear cloaks the serenity of a small town in New Jersey. Popular teenager Amy Hoffman has disappeared without a trace. The police can't say if she's alive or dead, but psychic Nancy Weber knows there's been a murder and fears the killer is on a rampage.
He's killed before, he's killing again. He's going to kill more.
She tells me something, I believe it to be gospel.
Can Nancy help catch the killer before his brutality is unleashed again? Three people out for a pleasant afternoon stroll, or so it seems. A closer look, and it becomes apparent this is not a recreational time filler. These people are not so ordinary. The conversation underscores the seriousness of their purpose.
She's screaming for her life and begging mercy.
Right when she was first found, there was no evidence that would indicate a...
Bill Hughes is a police officer, Nancy Weber is a professional psychic, and Jimmy Moore is retired. He was detective captain at the Parsippany Police Department. More than 20 years ago, the trio came together and stood in this secluded location. What happened here would change their lives forever. November 23, 1982. Amy Hoffman, an 18-year-old senior high school student, leaves her part-time job at a Morris County shopping mall. In the parking lot, she says goodnight to her friend. It's approximately 9:35 p.m. Two people see Amy as she walks across the back lot to where her car is parked. One, a fellow worker driving out of the parking lot. The other, her killer.
Well, her vehicle was found in the parking lot, not too far away from the store that she worked in. And the door was open on the car, and there was a witness, and she noticed a white male, in a green Chevrolet that was parked a couple spots away from where Amy's car was. And he was just sitting there in the car at that time.
It's Thanksgiving, 2 days since Amy Hoffman was last seen alive. Morris County, New Jersey comprises several small townships. Police departments from across the region become involved in the search for Amy.
It had a major impact on the community. Women were hesitant about going out on their own, especially at night.
20 miles away in Mount Olive, Nancy Weber, who runs her own psychic practice, gets a phone call from a woman.
She said, my daughter has a best friend who works at the Morris County Mall. And she's missing. She didn't come home. And that's when the vision popped up. The image I kept having was this naked body, multiple wounds all over. She was lying in water, raped. She had been terribly, terribly violated before she was murdered. And so I just went right into saying to her, I am sorry. I really can't discuss this with you. You call Amy's parents, or you call the police that are involved.
That same day, Amy Hoffman's body was found in a retention tank at the reservoir in Randolph.
There was a couple walking their dog through the woods, and it's an isolated area. It's like a lover's lane area. And they came across the body floating in the water. There was numerous slashes and stab wounds to her body, and some were post-mortem, meaning that after she had died, the assailant still continued to slash at her and cut her body. It was pretty gruesome.
Nancy's vision of the dead young woman was accurate. Bill Hughes, a detective with the Mount Olive Police Department, happened to drop by Nancy's house.
Most of the police officers in Mount Olive Township knew Nancy because she was just a friend of a lot of guys on the force, her and her family. And I just stopped by Nancy's house, just for a cup of coffee.
By the way, I read the newspaper account of Amy Hoffman. Why are they lying? She was raped. She wasn't not sexually abused. She was mutilated, not no wounds obvious.
The investigators at the time did not believe that sexual assault had occurred, but Nancy said that it had, that the girl had been sexually assaulted. There was no way of knowing because there was no physical evidence that you could see at the scene, according to the investigators, to indicate any type of sexual contact. What we found out later on was, yes, she indeed had been sexually assaulted by the suspect, and that was the result of forensics taken by the medical examiner's office.
I didn't say anything to Bill about wanting to be involved at all. It's one of the things I don't ever do. I wait to be asked. When it comes to this kind of work, it's very important, I believe, for all concerned, including the victim, to know that I am the appropriate person to participate. It's an ingredient. I'm one of the ingredients or not. So I don't ask to help.
Maybe to a lesser extent today, but at that time, psychics were certainly not taken seriously. They probably were looked at as people trying to make a name for themselves, people that would take advantage of the weak. I was a small player in this investigation. I'm on the periphery, so I really had no authority. I had to find somebody that was very open-minded, kind of like myself. You know, I'll try anything once, believe anything once until it's proven wrong.
Detective Bill Hughes has faith in Nancy's psychic powers, and she has a real concern that the killer will strike again.
He's killed before, he's killing again, he's going to kill more.
November 1982, Morris County, New Jersey. 18-year-old student Amy Hoffman goes missing. 2 days later, her mutilated body is discovered in a water retention tank. Police from all across the region are hunting down a brutal killer. On the same day Amy's body is discovered, psychic Nancy Weber has a vision of the crime scene. She knows that the young woman has been sexually assaulted and murdered even before police. Now she suspects the killer will strike again. She's right.
The second victim was a girl named Dedra O'Brien, who worked in a local restaurant and was heading home early in the morning. It was after midnight. She was forced off the road and abducted from her vehicle, and later brought to a rest stop on Route 80 in Warren Township, where she was murdered. We were all very upset because now we had 2 gruesome homicides on our hands, and we had a feeling that the same individual was involved because the same type vehicle was seen leaving the scene of Dedra O'Brien's homicide.
A second woman dead in such a short time leaves little doubt that police are dealing with a serial killer. But this time, the killer leaves a calling card: tire prints. Detective Bill Hughes thinks it's crucial to get Nancy officially involved in the case, but he is just one of hundreds of police officers tracking down what they now suspect is a serial killer. He needs to get someone he can trust to hear her out.
I knew that Jimmy Moore is a seasoned veteran. Jimmy has well over 20 years on the police force at the time. He's a captain. He's in charge of the detectives in Parsippany. He's more directly involved in the case because Amy Hoffman is from Parsippany. So I knew that if I could talk to Jim, then I might be able to get them to use Nancy to do some investigative leads on the case, or to give us some direction to go in the case.
I had never used a psychic, and I was a little skeptical. I really didn't believe too much into them. Is it possible? I mean, can somebody truly do this? I actually had flashbacks of being on the boardwalk and down at the Jersey Shore, and you see these signs, palm readings, and of course I don't believe in any of that. So I was a little skeptical, but I said, you know what? We have nothing really to go with. If there's a chance that it's going to solve the case, I'm willing to try it.
When I opened the door to Bill at 6'5", standing next to this about 5'7" man who he introduces as Captain Jimmy Moore from Homicide, I thought, uh-oh, what now? And he simply asked me to repeat to Jimmy what I had told him about the newspaper account of Amy Hoffman and my belief that there was a discrepancy there.
I asked Nancy some questions and stuff like that, and pretty much wanted to get to know her as an individual. And I found out that she was a just down-to-earth type of individual, and she didn't seem to be a person that exaggerates or puts anything on. And I was impressed by her personality. And I said, "How do you do this?" And she says, I just see it. And she says, "I don't know why or how, but I just see things." And she says, "All I can do is tell you what I see." And she says, "I don't want you to tell me anything about the case, and I don't want you to give me any leads."
What we decided to do at that point was take a ride in my car. And what we were going to do is take Nancy, by the scenes of the abduction, and the scenes of the murder, and the scenes where their bodies were left.
When I was driving with Bill and Jimmy in the car the first day, when we went down a road, I could feel I was coming towards the end of her life. It was as if the energy of the road itself got darker and darker. Got more magnetically charged with an energy that felt more panicky, heightened anxiety.
The first place that we went to was Reservoir in Randolph. We took Nancy down there and parked the cars, and we let Nancy walk around. It was an eerie feeling. You know, it was a very isolated area, wooded area, no homes around. Very macabre. You could almost feel the horror that Amy would have gone through. Amy could have been dumped in any one of about 12 acres. And Nancy went right to the spot where Amy was left.
I felt almost as if Amy was waiting for me there on the ground. So I got down on the ground on my knees, and I could feel no separation between the memory of what Amy went through and myself at that point. I began to speak words I believed were the last words, where she was begging, "Please don't kill me." I believe she knew that that's what he was about by then. She had already been raped. She had already been badly cut. And I believe she understood that he was enjoying this. And she didn't know how to get through to him. She had no idea how to get through to this person who seemed bent on destroying her. For me, it was very important to stay with it because I'm looking for the tiniest bit of a clue, a shred of evidence that might stop him. Went back in the car and kept reviewing. Now I'm going over all the film, again and again, like an editor, attempting to be as detailed as possible. Pop. He's from Polish descent. He grew up in Morristown. Pop. He was in Florida. He was in jail there for murder. And I'm telling Jimmy and Bill as I get it, in the car, driving. They let him out. Early parole? Pop. His name kept coming to me, the man who was with her. James. I don't know if she knew his name. I knew it. So when I got the last name beginning with a K and Koedatich.
I felt that Nancy was seeing what we were looking for. She had this individual pegged, and she was trying as hard as she could to give us as much evidence that she could see to arrest him, because she kept telling me, "Jim says this guy is sick, and he's just going to keep killing until he's caught." And she was upset with that. She was very adamant about telling me that this was a sick individual and he's just going to keep on killing.
It wasn't a crime of passion. It wasn't he stalked this particular person for weeks and had an obsession with her. He had an obsession with joy at causing harm. When I saw that, I knew he's not going to stop until somebody stops him. This man will not stop.
With 2 brutal murders occurring within 10 days, every available police officer in Morris County is on the case. Most are following procedure, the routine that is police work. 2 are following a totally different line of inquiry. Detectives Jimmy Moore and Bill Hughes have teamed up with psychic Nancy Weber in their own private investigation. They've been able to get quite a bit of information from Nancy about the first murder. Now they want to know what she can tell them about the second.
After the Dedra O'Brien homicide, I picked up Nancy and we drove to the rest area where the crime had taken place.
She took us right to the spot where the suspect had parked with Dedra. She described the encounter there.
And I see this truck in my mind. And I see a trucker, and I see this woman coming out of a speeding car. She's naked. She's knifed. And I'm looking at the car, and I'm looking at... It's the same car. It's James. I know it.
The only thing that stopped him from continuing with his attempt to sexually assault her was the fact that there was a truck parked in the rest area a little ahead of them.
Nancy felt that the assailant had just had enough and didn't want to be bothered with her anymore, so he stabbed her and threw her out of the car and then drove off. And that's when Dedra had enough strength to pick herself up and go to the truck to knock on the door, getting help from the truck driver.
The truck driver got on the CB radio and radioed for help, and troopers eventually got there, but unfortunately, Dedra passed away in the arms of the truck driver.
I was impressed with Nancy when I took her to the truck stop because everything that she was telling me was exactly what had happened, as much as we knew from the evidence and from the truck driver's statement.
She's telling us stuff that there's no way Nancy could have known because this is, you know, in the investigative files. This is not stuff that's being released to the press. And yet, Nancy knows what happened.
Over the next few days, Nancy keeps replaying the visions over in her head.
Every time I would go back to James, I would get another tiny little piece. He was at least about 5'10", slim, very narrow, thin, long nose, dark eyes. And I'd spend hours on it. I would be reviewing it, kind of like 18-hour days of review editing. Then I'd go back some more, and I'd feel the car, his brother, gas station. Brother owns it, works it. That's where he got the car, from his brother at a gas station. They're local. They're Wharton, they're Morristown, they're local. They all know who he is. Everybody knows who he is. Don't know his last name. He was a local terror. Growing up even, the cops all know who he is. He's not an unfamiliar character. This guy was dangerous when he was in high school.
Nancy's coming up with all this stuff that she couldn't have possibly known about, and she's giving us all this good information. And then a little bit of frustration sets in because you believe what she's saying, and now you're trying to think to yourself, how am I going to convince the bosses in Morris County to listen to what she has to say?
At this stage, the detectives want permission from the county prosecutor to officially involve Nancy in the investigation, but before they can present their case, they are denied access to his office. The prosecutor is not interested.
As Nancy and I started to walk through the door, a detective from the prosecutor's office stopped me, and who knew me personally. And he said, "Jim, what's she doing here?" I said, "Well, she's been with us and given us information on the case." And he said, "Well, the prosecutor doesn't want her here. He doesn't want to get involved with her." I was upset with the prosecutor for not even hearing us out. I felt that he should have at least listened to what we had to say. And it bothered me. To this day, it bothers me why he did that.
The headlines were all over not only our state, but the nation and all the news, that we had a serial killer. Nobody knew who it was. They couldn't figure it out.
Nancy is also upset and frustrated. she decides to appeal to a higher authority. She calls some students who she trusts, and they form a psychic circle. Together they use psychic prayer to try and stop the killer in his tracks.
Went through everything. And when I was finished, I told them, join hands with me. So we went to the light, went to the Godhead, went to the apex, and through that asked that if it was in the spiritual path of all concerned, to bring back to James Koedatich the pain he has given and the suffering he has caused. Let him feel it now. Let him get it in such a manner he can no longer give it. And I simply held on to that thought the rest of the night. It was my mantra. It was my chant. It is his time. Let him feel his own pain. He cannot give it out any longer. Let him feel his own pain. He cannot give it out any longer. It is over.
The power of divine intervention has been argued and disputed since time began. Can a New Jersey psychic's prayer really stop the killer in his tracks? In fact, there's been a dramatic break in the case overnight.
I get a call home, and I was told that an individual was arrested in response to the Amy Hoffman, Dedra O'Brien murders. They responded to a home in Morristown where an individual had been stabbed. While they were at the scene, one of the officers noticed the green Chevrolet sitting in the driveway, and it matched the description of the vehicle we were looking for. So they called for the forensic team to come to the scene to check this vehicle out. As it turned out, they found the tire on the car matched the imprint that was found at Dedra O'Brien's abduction. And subsequently, the individual was arrested and charged with the 2 homicides. When I found out who the individual was and his background, I couldn't believe how accurate Nancy's information was that she had given us.
So we have our guy under arrest, James Koedatich, and what we find out about James is very interesting. A lot of the stuff that Nancy had told us was right on the money. James Koedatich had a brother who was a mechanic, had lived pretty much his entire life in Morris County. James had moved to Florida, had been in prison in Florida, and that he murdered while he was in prison in Florida, stuff that Nancy had come up with. His last name was Koedatich, the K and the ITCH that Nancy had come up with.
Early in the morning, I get a call from Jimmy. And he goes, hey, Nancy, what did you do? I said, what do you mean, what did I do? He said, what did you do? I said, I had class last night. And I told them about it. And we said a prayer to finish it. Make this man have all the pain he gave to women. He said, well, James Koedatich. And as he said the words and the name, it was like, boom, 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 lights go on. I went, that's him.
All the information that she saw, that she gave us, was exactly the truth.
I think that a lot of people have to see for themselves. You know, there's going to be people that are going to watch this episode and they're going to see me and they're going to listen to me talk. They're going to listen to Jimmy Moore talk. They're going to listen to different people talking about their experiences with psychics, and they're just not going to buy it. And so be it. But if you're a police officer and you don't buy it, then you probably shouldn't be in the investigative side of anything. I says, because like I said before, you've got to keep an open mind. You've got to be willing to try anything. If you try it and you don't like it and it doesn't work out for you, so be it. Then don't try it again if you don't want to, but at least try it once.
But there is still a mystery surrounding the event of James Koedatich's arrest. Police arrived at his house after he called them complaining he'd been stabbed. Could Nancy's prayer have anything to do with this?
He claimed that a dark-haired woman ran him off the road and knifed him in the back. And at the time, my hair wasn't gray, and it was longish. And I thought, I wonder if he'd recognize me if he met me. I'd love it. I'd love him to know that, you know, you stand there with all the victims. And that victims have power, you fool. How could you do this?
It's up to you to decide whether she had anything to do with it or not.
On October 29, 1984, James Koedatich became the first man sentenced to die under New Jersey's revised capital punishment statute. The sentence was later commuted to life imprisonment. After his arrest, it was determined that Koedatich had actually stabbed himself. He never explained why, although the self-inflicted wounds were not life-threatening, and apparently he never again spoke of the long-haired woman he claimed had attacked him. But perhaps he sees her now and then. School's out, and 14-year-old Rachel Domas is running late. She misses her bus and starts the 3-mile walk home. She never makes it. Although there's no evidence of foul play, the pressure is on Detective Gary Miko to find the girl quickly.
Didn't have a crime. We didn't have a victim. We didn't have evidence of anything.
But psychic Nancy Weber claims to see a crime unfolding.
I know he's the killer.
Can the rookie cop and the seasoned psychic team up to find the missing girl? Long Valley, New Jersey, the sort of place where no one locks their doors, a safe place to raise a family. So when 14-year-old Rachel Domas misses her school bus and doesn't return home, police don't immediately fear the worst. Her parents have called the police to report her missing, but the most likely explanation, Rachel is just out with her friends and has forgotten to check in with her parents.
Phone rings, and it was the vice principal of the high school, who I had a rapport with, who I knew quite well, asked me what we were doing about the missing girl. I believe 2 or 3 of her girlfriends were in his office at the time and were encouraging him to give us a call to try and find out what happened, because they knew her and she wasn't that type of a girl.
The call from the principal disturbs Miko. He goes straight to Rachel's home to meet with her parents.
You had the immediate sense that something was wrong. The parents know their children well, and they're telling you something's wrong, then something's wrong. I remember seeing a photo of her on a wall. I recognized the face. The previous year, she was in grade school, and she walked to school, and we had a school post where we crossed kids in the morning and then crossed them again in the afternoon. So there's a definite human factor that comes into play, and also just knowing her personality as little as I did, I couldn't imagine her as a person who would run away from home. Walked into her bedroom, looked for any kind of luggage missing, clothing missing, a note, any sign of her running away. And everything was intact. The only thing missing were the clothes that she wore to school that day and her books.
Across town, psychic Nancy Weber's phone rings. It's a friend of the missing girl's family, and the woman is frantic.
Oh my God. This girl, Rachel, who lives down the block from us, hasn't come home from school. She's missing. I'm listening to this voice. And as I listen to the voice, images start flashing before me. I hear the scuffling, and I know it's leaves, and I know the smell of it is woods. I hear his voice. I see his eye wandering. I don't see his whole face. The smell of him, it's a smell of autos and gasoline, and everything moves very quickly, like rushing torrents of film, and that's why I have to go back over it and slow it down.
Nancy envisions a young woman, but she's not sure if it's the missing teenager.
And what can I do to confirm the image I have? Because I had an image of a girl, a photo. So I said to her, listen, do you have a photo of her? I can get her yearbook. Okay, so I'll put the woman to work, and I'll be able to see if the photo matches what I see in my mind.
Meanwhile, Detective Miko is totally unaware of Nancy's visions. All he knows is a girl has gone missing, and yet somebody, somewhere, must have seen her.
What I needed to do is try and find someone that saw her. If she missed the bus and she was walking, let's try and track down some witnesses that saw this person, our missing person, walking from the high school, that few-mile walk to her home. And that was my goal.
Rachel's route home would have taken her past a busy service station. Miko heads straight there.
Most people aren't home during the week, during the day. So let's start with someone that you know is up and down the street on a pretty consistent basis. And what I came up with was the owner of the station and several employees telling me they saw a vehicle, a green Volvo, parked up a hill off of Fairview Avenue, just off the roadway into the woods just slightly. And it was there for several hours during the course of the day. They recognized the vehicle as belonging to a former employee of the gas station, Michael Manfredonia. And he actually walked into the station that day, claiming his car broke down and needed some help. Maybe he saw her, maybe he drove past her. Maybe he was a witness. That was my hope, that he saw her. I found out that he lived in Chester Township, the next town over. And I rang up the detective there to get a little background on Michael. And he called me back and said that he was arrested for, I believe, receiving stolen property. I asked for Michael's address and wanted to stop by and visit him. He supplied that information. I hung up the phone. I was getting ready to go, and the detective called back from Chester Township, telling me that Michael was in their headquarters at the moment, just walked in and was checking on the status of his community service.
Miko is feeling lucky. He's got his first solid lead. He brings Manfredonia in for questioning. It's only been 3 hours since Miko was first assigned to the case. A gut instinct tells him that the man he's talking to might be somehow involved with the disappearance of Rachel Domas.
He wrote an incredibly detailed statement, almost covering each minute that he was there. He tells me his vehicle breaks down. He's able to back it up a hill off the roadway, walk around for 2 or 3 hours, got back at his vehicle, started it, and drove home. How does that happen? How does that happen? And I asked if he had possibly saw this girl walking at any point in time, and he told me no, he didn't think so. I remember asking, are you sure with all that walking around that you did, you didn't see her anywhere? You didn't pass her? You didn't, when you were near your vehicle, when you were walking on Fairview Avenue? Because I understand she missed the bus and you didn't pass by her? And the answer was no.
Miko calls in another detective for help, George Duker.
I was in a meeting and he said, I need your help now. I need you right now. And he had some bad feelings about this missing person case and I came to headquarters, he briefed me, and ultimately I had those same bad feelings.
20 miles away, Nancy Weber is about to have her worst suspicions confirmed by the friend of Rachel's family who had originally contacted her.
There's a knock on my door. The woman comes in. She has a yearbook in her hand. She opens to the photo of Rachel, and I look at it. I instantly know it's confirmed that the images I have, for me, match it.
Nancy is certain the girl is dead. Now she needs to convince police she can help. Every cop knows the first 48 hours in a missing persons case are critical. Evidence is still fresh, people's recollection of events still intact. It's been less than 10 hours since 14-year-old Rachel Domas was last seen at her high school. Detective Gary Miko might have a witness, but there's no evidence of foul play. Nobody even knows if the girl is alive or dead. At the exact same time, psychic Nancy Weber has a clear and terrifying vision of the girl's plight.
And the image was a sequence of his grabbing her and repeatedly, I think, raping her, but along with the vision, the name Michael.
Weber has no way of knowing that the police have a man named Michael in custody, but she has no doubt that she has been a psychic witness to a monstrous crime. She wastes no time contacting authorities. She calls the one police officer she knows she can trust.
And I call Ross English, who was chief of detectives at Mount Olive at the time, and I worked with him on a lot of cases. I said, "Hey, Ross, I just got some woman who came to me who showed me a photo of Rachel Domas in Long Valley. She's been missing since yesterday, I think. She's in the woods." He said, "Let me make some calls, I'll be back." I'm praying I'm wrong and that Rachel shows up somehow.
Back in Long Valley, detectives Gary Miko and George Duker are still questioning Michael Manfredonia. He's being very polite and says he wants to help, but the detectives feel certain he's hiding something.
George was a little more direct with him on trying to be clear.
We just weren't buying it up front. He was talking about how his car had broke down, and he had worked nearby in the area, and he took a walk toward Norwright Road. Just none of it really made sense. And at the same time as he's speaking, we're thinking about her possible actions as she left school that day. And the time frame and all of that just truly had us believing that this individual was involved.
And finally Michael said, "I want a lawyer."
Officers have been sent to search his home and car, but they turn up nothing. In the middle of it all, Gary Miko gets a call from Ross English. He tells him Nancy Weber's horrific story.
It was sort of like, yeah, okay, Ross, I'll give her a call. And I believe I put the note in my pocket. And at some point in time, I would give this person a call. Again, I believe my job at that point was just to track down people that could have seen her, witnesses. So I didn't call this psychic back right away.
Even if Gary had called Nancy right away, there was no way they could hold Michael Manfredonia any longer.
And it was so frustrating because here we had a suspect that we truly believed was responsible for something we didn't even know yet. Certainly nothing good. But we didn't have her.
Then the real kicker. The detectives are given an ultimatum by their boss. Charge Michael Manfredonia or let him go.
12, 14 hours after he was initially picked up, we were directed to release him and take him home.
It's 3 a.m. Miko and Duker reluctantly drive Manfredonia home. They're both certain they're making a big mistake.
Gary and I got in the car and we drove him home and we dropped him off, and we just had such bad feelings about dropping him off.
And we didn't want to let it go. And there's an abandoned railroad bed that runs parallel to Fairview Avenue. And George and I, in an unmarked patrol car at 4 a.m., still drove slowly down this railroad bed, just looking for any sign, any evidence of a crime, maybe our victim walking, anything. We didn't want to let it go. And that was the last thing we did that day, that long day.
Friday morning, 8 a.m., 17 hours since Rachel Domas was reported missing. Gary Miko remembers the note about the psychic. He gives her a call.
I have a completely open mind. If a psychic has something to offer, I've got an ear.
Finally, I could say something. I needed somebody to say something to.
She said to me, "I'm going to tell you something that I didn't tell the family, and I wouldn't do that. She's dead." And a boy named Michael did it.
Miko is stunned. He and Duker had a man named Michael in for questioning for hours. If Nancy is right, he had almost certainly released the girl's killer the night before and given him a ride home.
How did she know that? How did she get that? No one knew that we had a Michael in custody.
Gary appeared over the phone to be, I need this, I need more, give me more. And at the same time I heard this groan of, oh, we had him for hours here, we were questioning him.
But so far the police haven't any evidence that there's been a crime, yet Nancy claims to have seen it take place.
I am watching in-sequence event of someone, male, exploding all at once. I felt like this is somebody who had contained most of his rage to a degree and then just blew it all at once.
At the same time that Miko is talking to Weber, George Duker is leading a team scouring the area where Michael's car was last seen.
I got a radio transmission from one of the search teams telling me that they just found her pocketbook in the woods. I immediately raced from where I was to where they were and had entered into the woods. I get out of my police car. I'm running now in the woods toward the search team. They call me back again. We just found one of her shoes. I'm thinking at this point, this is tremendous. She came home from school late. She, for whatever reason, was in the woods. She tripped, she fell, she broke her leg, she couldn't get up, she couldn't get help. And then I go to the crime scene, and they're all standing there in just disbelief, looking at how he had partially buried her body. What he had done to her, the trauma of that homicide, was just unbelievable.
I was awoken by a phone call from one of our officers who was upset. They had found her body. They had found her buried, partially buried in a hole, like a big ditch, and partially covered. And I was on my way in.
I dismissed everybody, and I sat with her body, her and I, for about an hour and a half, while we got forensic people on site, and we brought them in closer and closer. On the way, checking every rock, twig, stone, branch, anything we could that might be of evidential value.
You arrive at the scene, and now what you're hoping you wouldn't have to see, you have to see. What you're hoping you wouldn't have to deal with, you have to deal with.
With the incredible accuracy of Nancy's visions in his mind, Miko knew immediately what he had to do.
Now you need to put a case together at this point in time. You need to find your suspect. Michael's your suspect. Michael's the only person so far that was put there.
We knew we then had to find him again. So it was all there. It was all there.
Gary, Miko, and George Duker rush to the Manfredonia home, but he is not there. His parents tell them that earlier in the day he had walked back into the heavily wooded mountainous area behind the home, but no one had seen him since. The detectives are devastated. 24 hours ago they had a criminal but no crime. Now they have a crime but no criminal.
I don't know why he decided to just take a walk. There was no press involved in terms of her body being located.
Once again, police assemble search teams, but this time they are looking for prime suspect Michael Manfredonia.
We had dogs, tracking dogs involved, and we were unsuccessful that day, I believe it was Saturday, and didn't locate him at all on Saturday or any sign of him.
Miko replays the conversation with Nancy Weber earlier that day. She'd said the killer smelled like oil and gasoline, and that fits. Manfredonia worked in a gas station. She knew his name was Michael, and long before police had the evidence, Nancy Weber knew that Rachel was dead. Could she also hold the key to where the killer was hiding out?
And she had said to me, just bring me something that he touched, that he handled, some personal belonging. And, maybe that would help me, tell you where he is.
I could not tell him where Michael was. I needed to make the contact with a person who had connections with Michael. And through that link, I can travel.
Before Detective Miko could officially meet with Weber, he needed permission from the county prosecutor.
We never used a psychic before on anything. So this would have been a first. And clearly with a major case, you needed to get approval from at least our prosecutor's office before any of that interaction could happen.
Sometimes when I work with law enforcement, I know that I work far better with them than I work with some of the families, and that I get far more results when I work with law enforcement because they're in direct contact sometimes with the evidence, even if they didn't see the killer or know it. They've touched the evidence in some way.
And the prosecutor wasn't getting a good feeling about this at all. He didn't like that type of attention drawn to the homicide case, thought that that it would get too much media, too much hype. It wasn't the direction that he really wanted to go. Gary and I then talked privately, and Gary said, "What do you think?" And I just said, "Do what you got to do. How can it hurt? How can it hurt? She might have some information here that will absolutely, turn this thing around." And he went off to see Nancy.
Gary Miko decides to defy the prosecutor and set up a meeting with Nancy. The discovery of Rachel Domas' body has turned the case of the missing girl into a full-scale homicide investigation. Prime suspect Michael Manfredonia has disappeared. Going against a direct order from the county prosecutor, Detective Gary Miko arranges a meeting with psychic Nancy Weber. He thinks she might hold the key to finding the murderer. But as he travels to meet her, doubts begin to creep in.
Was there something that she knew about this crime? Was she involved? Who knows? I didn't know. I mean, again, because of those reasons as well, it was worth meeting with her to see what she had.
And I'm driving there and I'm thinking, okay, so you're meeting somebody, you don't even know if it's Gary Miko. You've never met him before. You don't know if it's really a cop or some nut on the phone who called you. What are you doing? You're doing it anyhow, you know that. And so I have this nice discussion as I'm driving there, and I pull up alongside him, and I have a handbag, and I get in his car, and as I get in, I see the inside of the car is a cop car. He's real. And he immediately, "Can I see your handbag?" I'm thinking, okay, sure. What does he think I have, a gun?
And I'm thinking, maybe a weapon. Let's make sure I'm not being tape recorded. Let's just get all this out of the way. So, this person who might be a publicity seeker or some sort of a problem individual, I just want to make sure that, there's some safety zone here where I'm comfortable and she's comfortable.
He hands me this wire, kind of noose-like wire. And I'm saying, it's Michael. This was his. He's used it. He wants to use it on him. He couldn't. Suicidal. It's on the other side of the mountain where he killed her. He's on the opposite side. And as I see it, and I can still picture them, there are two huge drums. Normally, I can't tell you, but I knew 55-gallon drums, big drums.
She said, he can see you. He's up on a hill. She paused. He's groggy. He's out of it. He's overdosed on something. He's almost, delirious or delusional. Or she was just talking about how he was his mindset. He's physically he was tired. He wanted to go home. He can't go home because he knows you're there. He sees police cars come and go, and so he's afraid, but he desperately wants to go home. Sometime on Sunday evening, a decision was made to place a Chester Township police officer in the Manfredonia residence, just in case Michael came home again.
And I grab a piece of paper, back of something, and I make a very rough sketch of where the gallons of drums are in a hill with pools of water.
And she said, "You're going to catch him." And she looked at me and she said, "Real soon." At that exact moment, my police radio, which had been quiet most of the night, on the police radio, you could hear that Chester Township officer on his walkie-talkie say, "All units, he's in the home now." And I said to her, "You have to leave," and sort of opened the door and kind of booted her out of the car and told her I'd be in touch and thank you. And
Gary starts the car shifting, and I jumped out of the car, and he sped away, and that was it.
as I'm racing towards the home, I'm thinking about this encounter and floored by what just happened to me.
Gary arrives on the scene just as Manfredonia is being put in an ambulance. He jumps in, reads Manfredonia his rights, and accompanies him to the hospital. Once again, Nancy Weber's prediction proved to be uncannily accurate. 72 hours after Rachel Domas was first reported missing, Gary Miko and George Duker have brought her killer to justice.
For 11 years, the 11 years that followed Rachel's death, I tried to deny emotionally what I felt about this case. Feelings of being vulnerable, feelings of being a father of daughters, feeling of, again, the same thoughts and questions I had when I sat with Rachel at her crime scene. How could this happen? How could this happen? And could we have prevented it at all? No, it's 20 years later, and it's still close under the surface. It's still there.
Nancy Weber had been right about a lot of things. Her psychic feeling that the killer was somehow connected with the smell of oil was spot on. Manfredonia was a car mechanic. The location where he was found was surrounded by oil drums, just as she had described. She was also correct about his being suicidal. Manfredonia told police that he wanted to take his own life, and he was high on an overdose of cold medicine when arrested. On Monday, September 16, 1985, Michael Manfredonia confessed to murdering Rachel Domas in a blinding, frenzied rage. He's currently serving a life sentence at New Jersey State Prison.